This episode is sponsored by Smart Travel, a new podcast from NerdWallet. You know that one friend who always finds the best travel deals, picks the right cards, and somehow ends up in first class for the price of coach? Smart Travel is like that friend, but in podcast form. They cover all things finance, like how to book busy season trips without the busy season sticker shock, which airport lounges are worth it and which are basically free Wi-Fi and chairs, how travel advisors can snag secret perks you don't even know to ask for, and how to get real value from points, not just a tiny reward at checkout. The nerds at NerdWallet know this stuff better than me, and that's why I feel great about recommending the Smart Travel podcast. After all, we nerds have to stick together. Travel smarter and spend less with the help from NerdWallet. Follow Smart Travel wherever you get your podcasts. Summer is here in California, and it's time for me to go back to Quince and order some summer shorts. Quince European linen pants and shirts are also perfect for a warm weather upgrade to add to your rotation, starting at just $34. Their tees are soft and easy to wear, and their lightweight cotton sweaters are perfect for cooler summer nights. I just hit checkout on a pair of Clubhouse golf shorts, which I think will be good for traveling, and I don't even golf. Quince also goes way beyond clothing. They have custom upholstered sofas, ceramic cookware, premium bedding. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middleman, so you're paying for quality, not brand markup. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. Elevate your summer wardrobe. Go to quince.com/traveler for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/traveler for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Amateur Traveler, episode 1001. Today, Amateur Traveler talks about gorges, villages, and mountains, beaches, ferries, and tavernas as we go to Western Crete in Greece. This is Chris Christensen from Amateur Traveler. Let's talk about Crete. I'd like to welcome back to the show Jonty Crane from JontyTravels.com. And Jonty this time has come to talk to us about a European destination, Western Crete. Jonty, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
And what is your connection with Western Crete?
I was there a few weeks ago. And it's interesting to say European destination. I had planned to be in Iraq, obviously. That was more my jam. But there was a few things happened in the
Timing's a
Middle East
little off
reason.
for that.
Yeah, somebody decided it was a good idea to do something in the Middle East. So Iraq was off. And so I ended up in Greece for a few weeks instead. So today I'm going to talk to you a bit about Western Crete. And then I also headed up to Athens and the Peloponnese, so potentially talk about that on a separate episode.
Excellent. And why should someone go to Western Crete?
So Crete is the largest of the Greek islands, so it's quite a diverse place, and it's home to excellent hiking, dramatic gorges, atmospheric villages, epic coastlines, and ancient history. And I was there primarily to hike, but the itinerary I'm going to talk about is my week in Western Crete, which I was mainly doing day hikes, but quite a few of the sites. You could just do them as shorter day walks, and if you had a car, you could cherry pick from this itinerary. So the itinerary I did was with a company called The Natural Adventure, and they work with their local partners, Escape Travel, and it's self-guided hiking, which is something which is amazing, and it's very much more a European thing. It's quite hard to do in the more remote places, but certainly in Europe where things are well set up, there's a number of companies that offer self-guided hiking. So they will give you an itinerary, they sort out the accommodation or your transfers. The key thing is they move your bag. So luggage transfers when you're hiking, so you don't have to carry all your own stuff. They just move the bag from accommodation to accommodation, and then they give you an app with the suggested hikes you can do and with a GPS and the route. So it's relatively cheap because there's no guide involved, but you get to go and do some cool hiking. And it's an organised tour, but you're doing it yourself. So you've got the logistics are organised, but you get the flexibility to do what you want when you want to do it.
The only thing that I would add to when you were talking about what you can find in Crete is nice beaches. Some of the nicest beaches that I've seen in all of Greece are in that northern shore of Crete, actual sandy beaches instead of pebbles and rocks and things like that.
I'm not generally a big beach person, but I've said the beaches on the south coast, they're not the sandy, but they're the rocky, but they're quite dramatic. They're pretty good. So we'll come on to that with the itinerary. So I basically went from the north to the south of the island. So Crete, it's quite a big island. It's about 260 kilometers east to west, and it's very mountainous.
Right.
Because I'd planned to be in Iraq, it was quite a last-minute trip by my usual standards of planning a year ahead. So it wasn't really high on my bucket list, but I just was like, where can I go hiking in April in Europe? And so I hadn't really comprehended that there might be snow-capped mountains on Crete, which was quite a cool thing to find when I flew in. I was like, I wasn't expecting to see snow in April. So there's the White Mountains, or Lefketari, which has got over 30 peaks, over 2,000 meters high. So they're pretty big mountains, particularly on the western end of the island. So they're quite dramatic. So you go from, as you say, the nice sandy beaches on the northern shores, and then I headed up into the mountains and then headed down to the south coast, which is quite dramatic as well. And definitely from a tourism perspective, Crete is a popular tourist destination, as well visited. Right. But the northern coast, that's the more developed side. That's where there's more resorts, there's more infrastructure, and the south coast is a bit more remote and rugged, which is what I like.
Excellent. What itinerary are you going to recommend for us?
So, 1 week, starting from the north, heading down to the south of the island. And actually, there's a bit of history about Crete. My own civilization, there's a previous episode on Crete, which wasn't that long ago. I meant to look up the episode number. And she went to a lot more of the cultural sites. And basically, this itinerary is completely different to her itinerary. So and I've got a friend there at the moment who's spending a week in Crete, in Western Crete, and everything he's done is different to what I've done in Western Crete. So there's actually quite a lot to do in a relatively small island. If some of the things on here pique your interest, you could probably cherry pick and include some other sites as well. There's a lot of those ancient civilizations on the island 4,000 years ago. It was then under control of the Romans, the Byzantines, the Venetians, and Ottoman rule. So some of the places I went to, you could see Ottoman-era churches or Venetian-era buildings and Byzantine churches. So there is quite a bit of history and culture. And there's also quite a lot of history relating to World War II, particularly up in the White Mountains, which was a real stronghold for people fighting against the Germans who had occupied the island. So that's just a bit of background. So if we start at the northern end, so I flew into Chania, which is one of the main entries into Western Crete, and then you do a pleasant drive around the bay. Now, something I hadn't expected to see, which I can't guarantee you on your itinerary, but there's actually quite a large port there. And there was what looked like an aircraft carrier. And I thought, what's an aircraft carrier in there? And it was the USSR Gerald R. Ford, which was back from Iran, where they'd had a major fire in the laundry area. And so the aircraft carrier had gone to Crete to be repaired. So I was like, that's quite cool. I hadn't expected to see that. It's one of the largest aircraft carriers in the world. But there's also a few other ships in the port. So I went out into this area. It's got northern villages and foothills. So it's away from the touristy area. And this is an area they're really trying to develop, I wouldn't say ecotourism, but they're trying to do tourism, and I think successfully, on a small scale. So it's not resorts, It's not big hotels.
Is it more community-based tourism?
Yeah, the idea is it's more community-based tourism, and it's a smaller scale, but it's supporting these rural villages. And a lot of effort and probably some EU funds has gone into restoring a lot of the heritage buildings. So it's actually quite smartly done. And then the villages have got nice, not homestays, but small-scale accommodation, guest houses that you can stay in. And then there's quite a lot of small walks that people can do around the area. I did some of the larger walks, but they're very pleasant places to stay. And they do feel like you get away from the crowds that you might see on the northern beaches, for example. And the landscape is quite super dramatic, but it's very pleasant. There's lots of olive groves, sort of small churches, traditional villages, and then in the distance you see the White Mountains. So you get these snow-capped peaks in the distance.
Let's put it on a map. Where were you?
So I was staying in a place called Vamos. If you Google Maps it, you'll find Vamos, Vamos, and it's just a small community, and there's lots of small villages and communities around there. So the first day I did a 10-15 kilometer day walk from Vamos in a big circular loop. And then the next day I got transported out to Nipos, which was maybe 10-15 minutes up the road, and then did another 10-15K kind of loop from there. And so you're walking along quiet roads. There are some quite attractive footpath areas, and I probably went through 3 or 4 different villages on those walks. And so it's just a very pleasant thing to do. You hear the bells ringing in the churches. Some of the larger villages have got a village square with tavernas, places you can have lunch. There's quite a lot of seasonal colour, like I went in April, so the wildflowers were starting to come out. And it's just quite a low-key, pleasant place to visit. So I wouldn't suggest you're going to spend a week there, but if you are going to go to Crete, it is worth seeing something a bit different and escaping the crowds and heading up into those areas.
Now, how did you pick that? I know you didn't study this for a year. Is this something that was recommended by the tour operator? You're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it's pretty exactly. So the Natural Venture, they're like a broker, or they work
Okay.
with local partners. So when I did hiking in the Balkans, they had a local partner there, and I've been with them in actually a couple of weeks beforehand in Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. So they have an itineraries, 8-day itineraries. So pretty much they're designed for people to do it weekend to weekend. You have one day of travel either
Got it.
end. You
Yeah.
have 6 days in the middle, and you typically it varies, but some are point to point, like the Melalone Trail, which I can talk about another time, which where you're going from place to place. More common is that you maybe stay in 2 or 3 different places for the week, and then you do a variety of day walks from those places. So the places they pick
Okay.
are good for walking, but they also will organise local taxis or operators, because it might only be like a half an hour. They'll drop you off somewhere and you walk back, or they drop you off here and then you do the walk, and then they come pick you up and then take you back to your accommodation. So it's quite logistically easy, but you get quite a lot of variety.
And are these hiking trails or small rural roads, or what are you hiking on here?
Bit of everything, to be honest, especially these ones in the villages. There'll be very quiet roads. There'll be shortcuts, so there'll be little footpaths going through. There's a few hiking trails around. I have to say, I don't think I saw any other hikers on those 2 days. Pretty much had it to myself. April's a bit of a funny time, so it is the beginning of the season, the tourist season, but it was pretty quiet. And these are not like an established trail. This is something the company's worked out an itinerary. They've looked at the maps,
Okay.
worked with the locals, and gone, yeah, if we're going to do a 10, 15K walk, these are the places that you can go and see and do. So, yeah, it was a great way just to, it's not a big named famous walk. It's just a nice, pleasant, exploring, relatively remote part of Crete. You're going through villages, there's infrastructure. You do need the GPS app they give you, because you're turning left at this hedge road, you're turning right at this wall, and then you're going around the back of this church. And so you do need to kind of know where you're going, but it's relatively easy to follow. You just need to keep your eyes on your phone at any junctions.
Got it. And on that first day, are there any particular sites or viewpoints that they're guiding you around to, or are you just mostly walking in the countryside?
So it's between the villages, and actually in the villages they do give you information about each of the villages. One of them did have a local history museum, which unfortunately should have been open. I got there and it had a sign on the door saying back in 10 minutes. So I waited 20 minutes and nobody showed up. So I was like, I can't hang around here all day. So I moved on. But yeah, a lot of them date back to Byzantine times or earlier. There's not like a massive cathedral, but there's attractive churches, and say it's
Okay.
quite a pleasant rolling landscape. So it's quite nice sometimes not to do the big sites, because the big sites tend to attract lots of people. So this is pretty low key but very pleasant way to get the legs in action. And then as the itinerary went on, the days got bigger and harder and a bit more dramatic. So it was quite a nice warm up for the first days as you settling into walking in Greece.
Okay.
So I spent a couple of days there, and then I headed up into the White Mountains. So as I say, these are quite a big chain of mountains in Western Crete, and there's a plateau. So I stayed on the Askifoi Plateau, and it's about 730 meters above sea level. So it was noticeably cooler. Unfortunately, the weather was noticeably more mountain weather, so it was pretty wet. I think the second day I was there, but it's quite a dramatic landscape. So you're driving up, and you get this real sense of progression. I found about Western Crete, it's not that big an area to have quite a large diversity of landscapes. So you're going from the nice coastlines through these rolling hills, villages areas, up into the big mountains, and then coming down to the south coast is quite a different landscape. So up in the mountains, small populations now. There's not a lot of people live there. It's in the hundreds, definitely not thousands of people. So you've got these mountains, and then you've got this plateau, which is very fertile agricultural land, because it's surreal, because it's super flat, super green. My photos look like I've put super vivid filters on the photos, which I haven't. It was so green. I think particularly because it was April, it had rained quite a lot, and new grass is all growing up. And then you're surrounded by these mountains covered in snow, which is quite a dramatic landscape to see. And so that hotel I stayed in was called Panorama Hotel, and it lived up to that. So from my balcony, it's amazing views out across the plateau. I could see the snow-capped mountains. It was a bit, I wouldn't say depressing, but I went for quite a hard 3 or 4 hour hike, and I got back to my room and I was like, yeah, the views are actually better from my balcony than from the hike. Like, it was I put a lot of effort in, and the view hasn't really improved that significantly. So I could have just stayed in the hotel and enjoyed the views. You can definitely do hiking around these areas, but equally, if you had your own car, you can either drive through and just have a look around, or if you're going to spend the night, it's quite a pleasant place to stay. So I had a very nice stay in Panorama Hotel there. I did 2 walks. So The one that was in the itinerary was quite a steep 100-meter climb up quite rocky terrain. So I'm glad I had my hiking poles. It was all switched back through the forest. And then you come up at the top and you're a bit closer to the snow-capped mountains and you get quite nice views. And it was pretty, there's nobody else around. So that was quite nice to see. But actually, the walk I enjoyed more, and one that's more accessible to more people, is there's the remains of the fortress of Ascafoy, which is probably a 500-600-year-old at one point castle. And there's actually two structures on neighboring hills. One is more complete than the other, but it'd probably take you an hour total to do the walk off the side of the road. So it was close enough to my hotel. It was on the main road. You could just pull up with the car, and then it's about a 3-4 kilometer return walk. Just get different views on the landscape, really. So again, you get your mountains, you get your plateau views, you get to wander around this fortress remains. So that was a pretty cool thing I would recommend if you're heading through. And then in Ascafoy itself, the only real tourist attraction is the Ascafoy War Museum. Now, this is set up by a local. I think it's basically in the ground floor of his house. And he has got the most extensive collection of World War II artifacts on the island. And so if you like Nazi memorabilia, there's some swastika flags, there's copies of a young Nazi party magazine that was published in the late 1930s. There's a lot of small arms, so all sorts of guns of various kinds and various weapons. It's how much stuff can you fit into 3 or 4 rooms at the bottom of his house, and he's got like a balcony area as well with lots of bits and bobs. So if you like rusting weapons from World War II, and also just to find out a bit about what happened on Crete in World War II, because it was quite a large battle site. I know a lot of Kiwis fought on the island, and so that's just interesting from a historical perspective.
I use my cell phone pretty much constantly while I'm traveling, and that's just not to stay in touch, but that's also navigation, translation, information. So I need data. Don't be buying that expensive plan from your carrier to use overseas, and don't be getting a SIM from the airport. These days you can get an eSIM, for instance, from our sponsor Saily today. With an eSIM, you don't have to physically put anything different in your phone. Just download the Saily app and choose an appropriate plan. It might be a plan just for one country, global or regional plan. With Saily, an eSIM needs to be installed only once, so you don't have to even install a new SIM for each country, and you can have your data where you want when you need it. And because Saily is sponsoring Amateur Traveler, you can get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily eSIM data plans. Download the Saily app and use the code Amateur Traveler at checkout. Get an exclusive 15% discount on Saily data plans. Use code Amateur Traveler at checkout. Download the Saily app or go to Saily.com/amateur traveler. And that's Saily, Saily. And thanks to Saily for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. When people hear that Mint Mobile plans are only $15 per month, a lot of people wonder, what's the catch? Well, I can tell you, there isn't one. There are no gimmicks and no gotchas, just unlimited talk, text, and data, fast, reliable coverage on the nation's largest 5G network, and an award-winning care team. I guess that makes Mint Mobile a catch. You can even bring your current phone and your number, choose from 3, 6, or 12-month plans, and say goodbye to a monthly bill. Before Mint Mobile asked about being a sponsor in the show, I was already looking at Mint Mobile because what they offer, the same towers, the same service for less money, was something that appealed to me. After years of overpaying for wireless, I finally got fed up with crazy high wireless bills, bogus fees, and free perks that actually cost more in the long run. So I ask you, don't you have something better to do with your money? To get your wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/traveler. That's mintmobile.com/traveler. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/traveler. That's it. There's no catch. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on an unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And thanks to Mint Mobile for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. Well, and it was an unusual battle because it was an airborne invasion. So they invaded Crete over the heads of the British Royal Navy, basically coming in as paratroopers.
I think they've occupied most of the island, but the mountains are where the resistance was, which makes sense because people could hide away from them. Yeah, so that just adds a bit of historical variety to the place. Now, something I would note for the hikes here and in the villages, that I don't like dogs. I've got a fear of dogs. I think most people are fine, but for me, I really don't like dogs. And also, I think going in April, it's a little bit early in the season. So a lot of properties, they will have guard dogs. Now, these dogs are secure, so they are behind fences or are chained or both, but they're pretty aggressive. And rationally, you're like, there's a big fence between me and the dog, it's fine. But if you don't really like being barked at by aggressive dogs, it can be a bit unsettling. So that was just something that freaked me out a little bit on the first couple of days. I think the worst one was as I was in Ascafor and I was walking along the main road, and there was, I think it was like a bakery or something, but it was closed up for the winter. And there's this huge black dog, and it's running towards me and it's barking. And I can see the chain around its neck, but it looked like the chain wasn't attached to anything. And so this dog was moving, and I was like, oh, I've got my hiking poles, and I'm just freaking out. And then thankfully it stopped. So what happened was the chain around its neck was attached to another very long chain, which allowed the dog basically go from left to right. And so it had a lot of give to be able to run before it got stopped. And so that I found a bit unsettling. But I think that's primarily the time of year I went and the fact that I don't like dogs. I think for most people, it's not an issue. And I'm by myself as well. And that was only really around those areas. When I got down to the south coast and then the gorges, it was fine.
And you mentioned the gorges. I suspect that's where we're going next.
It's next step, the gorges, yeah. So the landscape, you're going up from the rolling hills into the mountains and then coming down from the White Mountains. Western Crete is one of the best places in Europe, probably, in terms of gorges. Like there are many gorges and they're quite different and they're pretty spectacular. So the famous one is the Smira Gorge, which I believe is probably the largest gorge. Now that is very popular. If people go to see one gorge, they go to Smira Gorge. Did you go to Smira Gorge when you visited?
No, I did not.
Okay, but it only opens in May, and I visited in April, so I couldn't go anyway. So instead of Smira Gorge, I went to one called the Imbros Gorge. And this was very nice, actually. It was quite a different scale. So Smira is a big scale gorge, not quite Grand Canyon, but broad. Imbros is a bit more like some of the gorges I've been to in Australia, where you're walking down and it gets narrower and narrower, a bit like Petra in Jordan, if you've been there. Like when you're going through to so I think the narrowest point is about 1.6 meters wide. So it gets quite narrow. It's quite atmospheric. And that was actually the only way to get from Ascafie down to the coast was to go through this gorge. So certainly when you can think from a battle perspective, it's quite a natural point in order to defend things. A longer walk where I basically walked, I got dropped off by a transfer at Imbros Gorge village, and I walked through down to the south coast. But most people will just do the gorge section itself. So to go from there to the coast is about 14 kilometers. To walk the gorge itself is about 6 kilometers, and there's lots of taxis available either end. So most people will just walk down through the gorge, takes a couple of hours, and they'll get a taxi back to wherever they left their car. As always, I'd always suggest you start at the top of the gorge because it's downhill. It's funny later on, it's going out quite another gorge I'll come on to in a moment, and there's always people coming up it. I'm like, why are you making life hard? It's quite an effort to go up this gorge. Just start at the top and walk downhill. It's much easier. And again, it was definitely quieter. I saw almost nobody around, and it's very atmospheric, and it's getting narrower and narrower, and you're going through, and it's relatively straightforward. The next gorge I went to was a lot more technical, but Imbros is pretty straightforward. You don't need to be a hiker. You don't need hiking poles. It's just a very pleasant walk for a couple of hours. So I'd really recommend that if you're heading through. If you had a car, you could drop it off, do the walk, get a taxi back to where you started, and then carry on down to the south coast. So Imbros Gorge, I would recommend.
And I'm assuming there's no facilities on the way. Once you start the hike, you either have to go all the way back or all the way through.
You say that, but I think it's open in summer. There was like a little cafe halfway through.
Okay.
Like a little mountain cafe. It was a little wooden shack, which you could see how they would probably put some soft drinks in there during the summer, but no electricity or other facilities. But yeah, it's a couple of hours, and there are certainly plenty of facilities. There's lots of tavernas and places to eat at either end of the gorge. Obviously, take water, it gets hot. I was there in April, and I have to say, particularly when I got down to South Coast and I was doing some big hikes, I was like, this is as hot as I would like it to be. The gorges are good because the sun's only direct down the gorge for a few hours a day because it's obviously a lot of the day you're in shade. The early village hikes, there's quite a lot of trees and foliage and things for shade and shelter. But on the south coast, there was nothing. I don't know how people come here in June, July, August especially to go hiking. It'd just be too hot. So just consider that, particularly, I guess, with climate change and some of the summers in Europe getting pretty hot. If you are going to do something active, then think about what time of year you want to visit.
Okay.
So I said I headed down to the south coast, and I stayed in a place called Skafkion, which is very pleasant. I guess it's a village, but it felt more like a town compared to the places I'd been staying to date. And it's funny, I think at one point it was called the town of 100 churches. And I think a lot of those churches were destroyed by various rules. I think in the 19th century, a lot were destroyed. But there was still a lot of churches. In the space of about probably 20 minutes, I walked past 10 churches. And I thought, okay, you haven't got 100, but you still got a lot of churches for a relatively small place.
Apparently it lost most of the churches in the war, in wartime bombardment.
World War II. Interesting.
Yep.
So the oldest one is a Byzantine era, so that's probably 600-700 years old, at the real top end of the village. So as I walked into the village, I passed it, and then you get lots of little churches on the way down through the village. So it's quite a well set up place. It's very pleasant. There's a beach which is popular for people swimming. It's not an amazing white sand beach, but it's quite a pleasant beach. And there's quite a few places to stay. There's a couple of really good bakeries. There's a small supermarket. So it's a very pleasant place. All the accommodation I had on this hike were all excellent. They all basically had balconies. You could sit out, enjoy the coastal views. So that was quite a pleasant place to stay. And from there, a popular trip which I did, you could do it either as a day trip or you could stay overnight, which is what I did. I stayed there a couple of nights, is on to Lautro. So this is a coastal walk, and this is probably the busiest stretch of my entire trip. So it is a known thing to do this walk. It's about 11 kilometers, and you basically walk from Skefgion to Lautro. So the first section is along the road, and then you come off onto a section which I think the reputation is worse than the reality. And I think if you Google it, you'll see some photos. Basically, there's a small section, maybe 50 meters long, where they've carved it out of the rock, or they've used explosives or something. And there is a chain that you can hold on to if you want to, and it's a little bit steep. It was fine. I have to say, I don't particularly like heights, but it was wide enough that I didn't feel that I was at risk. But that is something that people can feel, well, it's a bit exposed. But I thought it was fine. Now, that walk there is actually part of the E4 trail. So you'll see all these signs or saying E4. And it's like, what is E4? So Europe, so lots of long distance hiking routes in Europe. Most of them are GRs. So people may have heard of something like the GR20, which is on Corsica, or the GR131, which is on the Canary Islands, which I think means is Grand Route. But the E routes are the ultra long routes. So the E4 is part of a 10,000 kilometer long route from Spain to Cyprus. Now, I like my hiking. I'm not sure I want to do 10,000.
There's a lot of water involved in that route there. You just named a few islands there. So
logistically, yeah, you basically start at the southern end of Spain, you go all around the bottom Spanish part of the coast, and you go around southern Europe, and then you come down all through the Greek islands. So it's quite a long route. But if you want, you're like, what is this? I was like, Google, what is this E4 business about? So it's a long distance route. It's great that it's signposted. So if you wanted to draw and walk 10,000 kilometers, you could. But say it's a very pleasant walk. It's very popular. It's probably 2 to 3 hours one way. So you've got the slightly gnarly bit of the first stretch, which is only just when you come off the road, and then you're down to a reasonable path. When I walked back at it, I saw a couple, and the woman was carrying an infant in her arms. It's not extreme hiking. If you can do it with an infant baby in your arms, like most people should be able to do this hike. And so you come down to Freshwater Beach. I think it's a bit rocky, but it is quite a scenic spot. There's this really random restaurant which is built. It's not a boat, but it's a permanent structure in the water. It looks like not quite an oil rig, but it's like a restaurant taverna in the sea. And so it's like a really amazing location. I have to say, reading the Google reviews of it, the service sounds like it. There's a very grumpy old Greek guy who runs it during the seasons. It could be a bit hit and miss. And I say I came in April, so it was a bit early in the season for it to be open. Now, something I discovered on the way back, because I walked in quite early in the morning, and when I came back, I came in a bit later in the day, is that it is a nudist beach. Which is fine, nothing wrong with that. But if you're not expecting a nudist beach, and then you're walking along and you've got your hiking gear, I felt a little bit overdressed with all my hiking gear, and I was like, oh, okay, presumably this. There's one naked, oh no, there's quite a lot of naked people. Okay, this is probably a nudist beach. Okay, that's it. And yeah, Freshwater Beach halfway along. Chris, maybe you'll put on the cover photo. Seas are turquoise. They're beautiful coloured water. There's really dramatic cliffs. So actually, probably about half the beach is all cordoned off because of rockfall risk. So there's some quite dramatic landscapes, and you feel pretty remote despite the short distances. And so the idea is you go into Lautro, and that is only accessible by boat or foot. So it's something that's pretty cool. It's like all the buildings are white, as is pretty standard in a Greek place. But it's this kind of small community in a horseshoe bay surrounded by places to stay and places to eat. So all the way around the waterfront, there's probably 20 restaurants or so. And that's the thing you do. So you're either going to hike in on this 2 to 3 hour hike, or you get the boat. And there is a ferry that runs between there and Chura Skifgom, which when I went off season, the ferry was maybe once or twice a day. But in season, so if I come back in May or June, there's half a dozen times a day it runs along there. It's maybe 20 minutes, half an hour on the ferry. Or also water taxis. So I'd see people getting off the water taxi and then they go and stay there for a night or two. So it's a very nice place to stay. No cars, obviously, and then head back. So that's quite a picturesque place to stay.
And so the water taxi would be a small boat that you're hiring just for you or your small hiking group versus the ferry, which is running on a regular schedule.
Correct. So there was some quite upmarket hotels there. And so that might be included in your package, is that you'll get a transfer to your hotel and you'll spend a day or two there, enjoy it. There's not a lot to do there, but it's quite a picturesque place to stay. And so that's part of the deal. The majority of people I saw there have got the water taxi or a ferry versus hiking, because it obviously requires a bit of effort. But that's what's great, is because it's accessible by boat, they can move your bag. So my bag came on the ferry and I came on foot. And so I didn't need to carry much for the day walks. And then from there, there's another village called Finikas, which is probably less than an hour's walk. It's the other side of the headland, effectively, and it's quite a nice loop because you can go up and over the headland and then you can come back round the headland, and so you get a bit of variety. And it's almost like a smaller version of Lutro, although it does have road access, but it's quite a long way to get there by road. So there is road access. It's a nice little bay. There's a couple of places to stay. There's some restaurants. So it'd be just a really nice place if you stay there and want to go somewhere different for lunch, walk over the headland, have lunch at a taverna there, go for a swim, walk back. And actually on your way there, there's these ruins of Finikas, used to be called Phoenix in the ancient era, so Byzantine and pre-Byzantine back to Roman era. And there are some quite substantial ruins on the headland, so that's quite a cool sight to see. And then coming back around the headland, there's lots of churches around, but there's two in particular which I like. There was one which just very photogenic up on the headland, classic whitewashed Greek church. And then the other one I really liked was like a cave structure. So it's built into the hillside and it's just got a front wall, and then the rest of it is in a cave. So those are quite cool to take a look around. And so that's just a very pleasant thing to do in that neck of the woods.
Okay.
And then my last day was the longest day. And again, you could do this separately. So I did this as a bit of a combo, but you could do parts of this independently without having to do the full 25K walk. So from Lotrol, you can head up the hillside. So you basically, it's a switchback. You're probably climbing 700 meters. There's no shade. It's quite hot. It's a bit of a slog. Really nice views back down towards the coast. And then you get to the top and there's a village called Anapolis. And I guess just as you get to the top, there's this, again, a very attractively located church. And I hadn't quite got my bearing. So I came up this cliffside and I'm looking back and obviously I'm like, okay, where's the nice coastal views? And then I got to the church and then you see the White Mountains. And so you come up and you're like, oh, there's this really nice panorama of these snow-capped mountains. And I look behind me and there's all these beaches and there's little ferries running around and there's people sitting on there's nudist beaches and things. And I look around and there's this great mountain. So that's quite a cool landscape to see. And Anapolis is a pretty kind of sleepy village, but you kind of walk through there and maybe half an hour's walk up the road, a very short drive, is the Aradena Gorge. So you could do the Aradena Gorge just as a standalone piece, or you can combine it into a big hike like I did. So the Aradena Gorge, I think, is a really good alternative to the Samira Gorge because it is not quite as epic, but it's still a big, epic, impressive gorge, and it is definitely less popular than the Samira Gorge. And so the Anadona, it's interesting actually where you start. So the village of Anadona is effectively an abandoned village. So the village is ancient, thousands of years old, and there's lots of old buildings in various degrees of ruin. And I think the population is currently 4 people. So 4 people live in this place, and it's a bit of a ghost town, but it's quite atmospheric. And you get there, actually, you cross the Aradena Bridge. Now, this is 138 meters high.
I've seen that bridge. I would say you crossed that bridge. I would wave to you from the side, I think.
The bridge is generally fine, but I have to say, towards the end, I think one of the wooden planks had a bit of a hole in it, and I was like, I'm not sure I want to take my car over here, but it is a functional bridge, and I say it's the highest bridge in Greece.
As I've mentioned before, being a guy, and especially of my generation, skincare was not something we really focused on. OneSkin has become a part of my daily routine, and I do like the way that it makes my skin feel. We've talked about OneSkin before and why it stands out. It's not hype or fancy packaging, it's real science. The founders are longevity researchers who developed OS1, a proprietary peptide designed to target zombie cells, which are linked to visible skin aging like wrinkles and loss of elasticity. Instead of just masking signs of aging, OneSkin works at the source to support healthier, stronger skin. Born from over a decade of longevity research, OneSkin's OS1 peptide is proven to target the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. For a limited time, try OneSkin with 15% off using code TRAVELER at oneskin.co/traveler. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code TRAVELER. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support this show and tell them I sent you. And remember, Traveler is spelled with one L the U.S. way. And thanks to OneSkin for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Support comes from Wise, the smart way to manage the currencies you need around the globe. Fed up with losing out to hidden fees when you send money abroad with your everyday bank? Choose the smart way, Wise. You can count on the exchange rate you'd usually find on Google. No unwelcome surprises. Plus, ditch that where's my money feeling. Most transfers arrive in under 20 seconds. Join millions saving billions on hidden fees. Be smart, get Wise. Download the Wise app today. T's and C's apply.
Now, if you're more extreme than me, and probably more extreme than you, Chris, have you ever done a bungee jump?
Oh, I have not, and certainly more extreme than me, yes.
Yeah, I live in New Zealand when they invented bungee. I am not doing a bungee jump. It just, doesn't do it for me. So that you can actually go and bungee off this bridge. And it's the second highest bungee bridge in Europe. There's one that's a bit high called the Europe Bridge in Austria, which is 190 meters high. But 138 meters, particularly when you're bungeeing into a gorge towards solid rock at the bottom, seems a bit scary. But anyway, you get some pretty cool views. It's a lot quieter, I think, than Samira. And you can walk down through the gorge, which is what I did. So you do a bit of switchbacks, you get down to the bottom. So the walls at either side of you are 138 meters high, because that's how high the bridge is. And it starts quite close, and it opens up, and it closes, and so you get quite a lot of variety. Now, I would say it is definitely more technical and harder than the Imbros gorge. You probably want to allow at least 3 to 4 hours to get down this gorge.
And when you say more technical, transitioning from hiking to canyoneering, where I'm scrambling over rocks or grabbing onto ropes, or what does technical mean in this case?
Correct. You don't need helmets, you don't need the gear, but there are sections with chains, which are quite useful to hold on to. And there are quite a lot of sections where it's just a big load of boulders and rocks. And so they have got signs, but you do need to keep your eyes open for the arrows, because you say, I just want to go this way. And it's, no, I need to go this quite convoluted way in order to get around the rocks in the right way. My blurb said it could be up to 2-meter drops. I don't think I saw maybe 1 to 1.5 meters, where you're probably sitting in your bottom and just putting yourself down. You need to just pay attention to where your feet are going, and some places you might need to use your hands. And there's a couple of sections with chain with, I guess you could say there's a bit of exposure risk, like if you did fell you might hurt yourself, but it's not extreme exposure, it's not canyoning, but you just need to take care. I did see people with kids doing it, and probably kids are right, they enjoy climbing and doing things like that, but you're not probably going to take young kids. If you've got issues with your knees, it could be a little bit painful, especially coming down. So just take your time coming down through it. But it's a really awesome gorge. Some sections are very red, almost Australian iron ore red rock cliff sides. And it's really cool because the gorge finishes at the beach. Like, I've never been in a gorge where you walk out at the bottom end of the gorge and you're on a beach. At Mamaro Beach. So that's quite surreal, and that's quite a cool thing about it. So I'd really recommend down a gorge, either part as a longer hike or just as a standalone hike. And that's what most people will kind of do. They do it as a walk down, and there's taxis available at either end, and they get a taxi back to where they left their car.
Got it. Well, and there's also a taverna right there above the beach. So you've earned your stop there at that point.
Correct. And actually, on the subject of foods, Greek cuisine is quite pleasant. Lots of fresh salads, grilled meat, seafoods,
Sure.
olive oil. Greek yogurt. I've always liked yogurt, but they ate so much Greek yogurt. Like, it was just, there's plentiful supplies of it, and
Sure.
it's very delicious. So I was having a lot of that. And they say like, the Travernas are the main places you're going to eat. Like, you're not going to find a Thai restaurant or an Italian restaurant. You're going to be eating local food. I was there over Easter, so this was early April. Things were just starting to open. So, like, in example, in La Troll, there was maybe 2 places to eat, and in peak season there would be 20 places to eat. So I think probably, reflecting back, May is probably a really good time to visit Crete because it's not super hot yet, but most of the tourism infrastructure is up and running and places are open. So, or at the other end, I guess probably September towards the back end. But I wouldn't go to Crete in August or July because it will be super busy and super hot.
Right.
So those, it depends again on dealing with heat. But yeah, those would be my issues. Unless you're going to go for a beach resort holiday. But if you want to be active and out and about, then you want to go at the beginning and end of the season.
Excellent. I am curious with your New Zealand connection when you were in Hora. I don't know how to say this. The word we've been saying here is Sfakion. So Sfakion.
Sounds better than my pronunciation. Yep.
Did you happen to see the monument commemorating the evacuation during World War II of the British and Anzac forces? There's also a plaque there that commemorates the Cretans who were executed by the Germans for helping the New Zealanders escape from Crete.
I'm slightly embarrassed because it's quite a small place. So I
figured you would have mentioned it if you had seen it. So one of the reasons I think the churches were bombed is this was the place where some of the Allied soldiers fled the island after the invasion.
Ah, excellent. That makes sense. And I'll have to go and find it on Google to see what the plaque looks like and where the plaque was, because let's say it's not a very big place. So I must miss that. I think that's part of the thing with hiking. You are looking, but I got there at the end of the days. So I get there, I want to go to my room, have a shower, have a bit of a lie down. I didn't have the whole day to come around the village, but that's interesting history. Thank you for sharing that, Chris.
And I think you've wound down your itinerary. Am I correct? Or is there more?
So that's a week, as I say.
Cool.
Pick and choose from it, or the Natural Venture is the company that I used for the trip. That cost about $1,600 for the accommodation, transfers, including the airport transfers and all the route information and breakfast. I had to buy my own lunches and dinners. I had to pay basically a single supplement. If you do it as a couple, these self-guided trips are super good value because they obviously add a bit of a margin on top in terms of the logistical services they provide, but the accommodation was really good throughout. But you do pay a bit of premium if you're doing it by yourself.
Excellent. Anything else we need to know before we head off to Crete?
A little bit of logistics. So main entry points, there's Chania Airport, which I flew into, and now EasyJet. They fly there. I swear by EasyJet because they're a European budget airline, but they're not a Ryanair. Ryanair are just, they're a bit extreme in terms of weighing everything, checking everything. It's very cheap if you know what you're doing, but if you make any mistakes, you pay the price of doing it.
They will charge you, for instance, to print out a boarding pass at the airport. There'll be something like a €15 charge or some ridiculous thing like that. So you just have to know their system if you're going to fly them.
Exactly. Whereas EasyJet, I find just a little bit more reasonable. And then there's Heraklion, which is the other main airport. I get that's it. Which is the other main.
And I would say Chania, by the way, is the way that I heard the people there pronounce it. But
excellent. So there's 2 airports. They're well serviced, so it's a relatively easy place to get there. There's probably ferries as well from other parts of Greece if you want to take a bit longer. Renting a car is pretty straightforward, and if you weren't doing it as part of this package trip, then you could do this trip relatively straightforward with a car, and then you just get a taxi back once you've done some of the hikes. The roads, certainly in April, were pretty quiet, and they were sealed on pretty decent roads, but they can be quite narrow and winding in some of the mountain areas. In terms of safety, I didn't have any personal issues, safety concerns in terms of crime. Obviously, the dogs terrified me, so that was my main safety issue, but I think that's probably more me than from other people. And I say, just heat and sun. It is a hot place, it is a dry place. There's no water supplies generally, so make sure you're carrying sufficient water. And navigation, if you're doing the coastal route, as long as the coast is to your left or your right, you're not going to get lost. But certainly the inland routes, you want to have some decent maps to get around. In terms of English, I found basic English. There wasn't a huge number of English visitors when I was there, at least, probably other Europeans. So there's enough to get by in accommodation and restaurants, but I didn't find the English excellent. I found that elsewhere in Greece, that it wasn't, English didn't seem to be a strength compared to some other places, which is fine. Like, you can get by, it's fine. It's just something to be aware of. Greece is actually, it's relatively affordable. Like, accommodation and food are pretty cheap, particularly compared to Northern Europe destinations. Southern Europe is always going to be better value in terms of the Balkans, or Spain or Greece are very affordable, it seems, compared to other parts. Now, most places did accept credit cards, but not all. I think some could accept, but they didn't want to accept it. They were a bit, have you got cash? Have you got cash? So it would pay to carry some euros with you for those areas. Internet coverage was fine in the towns and villages. Obviously, as you imagine, pretty patchy in the mountains and the gorges. And then I've talked already about when to visit. So yeah, I had a nice time in Greece.
The two things I would add, based on my experience there, is one is there are also ferries that come in if you're coming in from one of the other Greek islands. For instance, we came in from Santorini. Ferries certainly going into Heraklion and Chania, which you mentioned, probably some other ones that I'm not aware of as well. And then the other thing about renting a car. So I didn't love the driving in Greece. The driving in the country roads, I didn't mind at all. But the driving in the main highway, this Route 90 that runs across the north part between Heraklion and Rethymno and Chania, is a 2-lane road driven like a 4-lane road. And so I literally found I was driving with my right tire 3 feet off the highway because people were passing me so much, as if there were another lane or two. So it was a little bit challenging from that point of view. The driving was a tad aggressive, I would say. And then, of course, it didn't help that along the way you'd see these little tiny Greek churches, models of Greek churches about 1 foot by 1 foot along the side, where they had markers where someone had been killed in the traffic, and this was a memorial to them. So I remember just picturing what my home church would look like as a model here along the side of the road here. So it was a little aggressive. But in general in Europe, I think as you go south, the driving is a little more aggressive. As you go north, it gets a little less so. This is pretty far south.
Correct. That's interesting about that, because I'd seen those little small churches, little model churches, the shrines. Okay, the rationale for them. Okay, that's good to know. It is a relatively wide 2-lane, because I remember when I got the transfer back to the airport, and it's basically 3 lanes wide, but it's a 2-lane road, and so there is space in the middle. But obviously, if somebody's coming the other way, it is a bit of a free for all. So,
but they will pass you in that middle non-lane even when someone else is coming. They don't drive it like a 2-lane road. They drive it like a 3-lane or a 4-lane. So it's a little, just something to know. And I'm someone who don't generally have a problem driving in Europe. It's generally not an issue, but there are a few places like Rome and Paris and the northern part of Crete that were a little more challenging. So excellent. As we get to our wrap-up questions, you know what's coming here. You're standing in the prettiest spot in Western Crete. Where are you standing and what are you looking at?
I think most people would probably say the coastal stretch on the south coast, but as made apparent at the beginning, I'm not a big beach person. So I like the fortress of Ascofoe. I just like exploring ruins and having these amazing views of snow-capped mountains and looking out across the plateau, and that I thought was really cool. And there was nobody else there, and it was just so that's more my scene.
Cool. I think I read that didn't go quite as far back as you were thinking, but dates back to the War of Independence with Turkey, which would be late 1800s.
Oh, okay. Relatively recent. Okay.
Relatively recently.
It's been pretty ruined in the time since then.
And I could be wrong about that. I'm trying to listen to you and pay attention at the same time. And one thing that makes you laugh and say only in Western Crete.
It makes me laugh, but it was the Aradana Gorge finishing at the beach. I didn't expect that. I'm walking along a gorge and then I'm on a beach and I'm like, this is pretty cool. I can't think of anywhere else in the world that I'm sure you can, but I'm not come across anywhere, because you always think of gorges as often quite arid, where quite a rough environment, very rocky, and then suddenly you're on the beach and there's a taverna and there's people sunbathing.
Excellent. And if you had to summarize the region in 3 words, what 3 words would you pick?
Mediterranean, varied, and mountainous.
Excellent. Our guest again has been Jonty Crane. You can check out all the other episodes we've done with Jonty in the archives. You can find his travels at jontytravels.com, or you can find travels from like a year ago, because I know I can't ask you, do you have a post on this, because you won't have it for a year. But
yeah, I could check, but I think it's probably scheduled to come out around probably June 2027. There will be numerous posts on this, so it depends when you're listening to this episode.
Excellent. Jonty, thanks so much for coming back on Amateur Traveler and talking about your newfound love for Crete.
Thank you.
I sold my car in Carvana last night.
Well, that's cool.
No, you don't understand. It went perfectly. Real offer, down to the penny. They're picking it up tomorrow. Nothing went wrong.
So, what's the problem?
That is the problem. Nothing in my life goes as smoothly. I'm waiting for the catch.
Maybe there's no catch.
That's exactly what a catch would want me to think.
Wow, you need to relax.
I need to knock on wood. Do we have wood? Is this table wood?
I think it's laminate.
Okay, yeah, that's good. That's close enough.
Car selling without a catch. Sell your car today on Carvana. Pickup fees may apply.
Study and play come together on a Windows 11 PC.
And for a limited time, college students get
The best of both worlds.
Get the Unreal College Deal. Everything you need to study and play with select Windows 11 PCs. Eligible students get a year of Microsoft 365 Premium and a year of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with a custom color Xbox wireless controller. Learn more at windows.com/student offer. While supplies last. Ends June 30th. Terms at aka.ms/collegepc.
Thanks to Jonty for coming back on the show, and a special thanks to the patrons of the show who help support Amateur Traveler financially. If you're interested in learning more about what you get by being a patron of the show, besides the satisfaction of a job well done, go to patreon.com/amateurtraveler. Oddly enough, one of the pieces of feedback I got recently was from Jonty about the episode we did on Santiago, Chile. Hi, Chris. At the risk of being as frequent a commenter as guest on the show, the Santiago episode brought back good memories of my time in the city. To add to the episode itinerary, I'd highly recommend visiting the Cementerio General de Santiago, one of the largest cemeteries in Latin America with an estimated 2 million burials. The 85-hectare site includes beautifully ornate mausoleums, the tombs of many well-known Chileans, and Patio 29, a deeply moving historic mass grave site used to bury anonymous victims during the Pinochet military dictatorship. Safe travels, Jonty. Thanks so much, Jonty. Seems like I say that a lot lately. There's still room in the May 2027 Amateur Traveler trip to Bolivia. To learn more, go to amateurtraveler.com/trips or just drop me an email and I'll send you the information. With that, we're going to end this episode of Amateur Traveler. If you have any questions, send an email to chris2x@gmail.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at amateurtraveler.com. And as always, thanks so much for listening.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's Room of Choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.